June 4th, 1942. Before dawn. Battleship Yamato. Pacific Ocean, west of Midway Atoll. The sea around the Japanese flagship is black, immense, and almost perfectly calm. Inside Yamato, Japan's newest battleship, steel passageways hum with ventilators, generators, and the low vibration of machinery driving 68,000 tons through the darkness. Map lights glow over the operations room. Cigarette smoke hangs motionless beneath the ceiling. Officers speak quietly, because there is no reason yet to raise their voices. The plan is moving forward. Somewhere far ahead, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, are cutting toward Midway with the striking power that had shattered Pearl Harbor only 6 months earlier. Their flight decks carry the finest naval aviators Japan possesses, pilots who have bombed battleships in Hawaii, sunk British warships in the Indian Ocean, and broken resistance across the Pacific, now wait beside Aichi dive bombers, Nakajima torpedo aircraft, and the deadly Mitsubishi Zero. Midway is supposed to be their next victory. Yamamoto has built the operation as a grand act of deception. Strike the tiny American atoll. Force the United States Navy to rush out from Pearl Harbor. Allow Nagumo's carriers to weaken the Americans from the air. Then bring forward the battleships and cruisers of the combined fleet to finish the destruction in a decisive surface battle. This is the kind of battle Japanese naval officers have studied for a generation. A single crushing encounter, one day of fire that will decide an ocean. But in the darkness aboard Yamato, Yamamoto cannot see the first fatal truth. The Americans are not rushing blindly toward his trap. They are already waiting inside it. Weeks earlier, in a cramped basement at Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rochefort and the crypt-analysts of Station Hypo had bent over intercepted Japanese radio traffic. They worked in shirt sleeves beneath humming fans, surrounded by scraps of code groups, message fragments, and coffee cups gone cold. The Japanese target appeared again and again under a coded designation AF. Rochefort believed AF was Midway. To prove it, the Americans sent an uncoded message from the atoll reporting that its water distillation plant had failed. Soon afterward, Japanese traffic reported that AF was short of water. That was enough. Admiral Chester Nimitz now knew where the blow would fall. More importantly, he knew approximately when. While Yamamoto's fleet crossed the Pacific under orders for secrecy and surprise, American carriers were already steaming northeast of Midway. Enterprise and Hornet were there under Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance. Yorktown, battered at Coral Sea and believed by the Japanese to be out of action, had been patched together at Pearl Harbor and sent back to sea under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher. 3 American carriers waited where Yamamoto expected none. On the Japanese side, the strength meant to overwhelm the enemy is scattered across hundreds of miles of ocean. Nagumo's carriers are in front. The invasion transports trail elsewhere. A separate force is operating toward the Aleutians. Yamamoto himself, with mighty Yamato and the battleship force, remains too distant to protect Nagumo quickly if something goes wrong. The plan is vast, elegant on paper, terribly fragile in battle. At 0430, far ahead of Yamato, engines thunder across the flight decks of Nagumo's carriers. Deck crews crouch beneath spinning propellers as aircraft begin rolling into the wind. Bombers rise one after another into the gray light, loaded for Midway's runways, fuel tanks, hangars, and gun positions. Fighters climb above them, their wings briefly catching the first pale glow of morning. 108 Japanese aircraft form over the fleet, then turn southeast toward the atoll. On Akagi, Nagumo watches the strike disappear over the horizon. He believes the American carriers remain absent. His scouts will search. His reserve aircraft will wait below decks, prepared for whatever the morning demands. On Yamato, The operation remains quiet enough that Yamamoto can still imagine the battle unfolding according to his timetable. Midway will be struck. The Americans will react. Japan's carriers will find them in the open sea. But northeast of the atoll, American flight decks are already alive with movement. Pilots pull on gloves. Ordnance crews check bombs and torpedoes. Lookouts scan a brightening horizon for the enemy, whose secret arrival is no longer secret at all. The trap is closed. Only Yamamoto does not yet know which fleet is inside it. June 4th, 1942. 0603 hours. Midway Atoll. The first warning comes as a distant vibration in the air. On Eastern Island, Marine gunners lift their faces from sandbagged positions and hear engines gathering beyond the clouds. Then the sirens begin. Men sprint across revetments slick with spray and oil. Ground crews run from parked aircraft. Anti-aircraft crews wrench their guns toward the northeast as black specks multiply in the brightening sky. Lieutenant Chuichi Nagumo leads the Japanese strike toward the atoll. Beneath his bomber, Midway is a narrow slash of coral and concrete, crowded with fuel tanks, hangars, radio masts, aircraft shelters, and runways. It looks small enough to crush in a single blow. Then Midway erupts. Shell bursts punch, dark holes among the Japanese formations. Marine fighters climb into them, hopelessly outnumbered but attacking anyway. Zeros slash downward. Cannon fire flickering from their wings. Bombers roll into their dives. Explosions walk across Sand Island and Eastern Island, smashing buildings, burning fuel, tearing cratered wounds into the ground. Men throw themselves flat as blast waves sweep over them. A hangar catches fire. A power plant shakes under near misses. Aircraft on the ground burn in orange pools of aviation gasoline. Yet when Tominaga circles above the smoke, he sees the problem at once. The runways still exist. The defenses still fire. Midway has been hurt, but it has not been silenced. At 700, his message reaches Nagumo aboard a Kagi. A second attack is necessary. The report lands in the carrier's command spaces like a stone dropped into machinery. Nagumo had held reserve aircraft ready for an American fleet, armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs, but the enemy carriers have not been found. Midway is still dangerous. His first strike will soon return low on fuel and damaged, needing clean decks on which to land. At 7:15, Nagumo makes the decision demanded by the information in front of him. The reserve planes are to be rearmed for another attack on Midway. Below deck, ordnance crews move with disciplined violence. Torpedoes are rolled away. Land bombs come out. Fuel hoses snake across hangar decks. Mechanics sweat beside warm engines while armorers wrestle heavy weapons under wings. The carriers remain magnificent fighting machines. But now their strength is being reshaped for the wrong target. Because the Americans are already coming. From Midway, torpedo bombers and marine dive bombers rush toward Nagumo's force in scattered groups. Their crews know almost nothing except the direction of the enemy. Some are flying slow aircraft that cannot survive against Zeros. Some have never attacked a carrier before. They fly anyway. On a Kagi, lookouts suddenly point toward the horizon. Incoming aircraft. The Japanese carriers turn hard. White water boils along their hulls. Zeros dive on the attackers, tearing into them with cannon and machine gun fire. American torpedo planes skim the waves, trying to hold course long enough to release their weapons. One after another they fall trailing smoke. Torpedoes splash into the sea, running wide or failing to strike. From Nagumo's bridge, the defense appears successful. The attackers are brave. But they are being cut apart. Then, at 0740, the signal room receives a report from the cruiser Tone's delayed scout plane. Enemy surface ships sighted northeast of the carrier force. For a moment, the words are incomplete. Ships could mean cruisers, destroyers, a force sent from Midway. They do not yet confirm the single threat Nagumo has been searching for since dawn. A carrier Still, the report changes everything. Staff officers crowd over charts. Bearings are checked. Distances calculated. Questions snap through the command spaces. What kind of ships? How many are carriers present? Nagumo orders preparations to attack the newly sighted enemy force. But his decks are caught between missions. Aircraft have been armed and rearmed. Tomonaga's returning strike is approaching. Its pilots wounded, exhausted, and nearly empty of fuel. American attacks continue to force evasive turns, interrupting flight operations again and again. The timing is becoming murderous, far to the west. Aboard Yamato, Yamamoto remains separated from the crisis by hundreds of miles in fragments of radio traffic. The battle he designed as a carefully arranged ambush is no longer moving according to sequence. Nagumo is being asked to destroy Midway, recover returning aircraft, defend his carriers, identify an unknown fleet, and prepare a decisive strike almost at once. Then another message arrives from Tone's scout. The enemy force appears to include a carrier. Now the shape of the morning is finally visible. The Americans are not arriving late. They have been waiting for him. June 4th, 1942, 08:30 hours. North Pacific, northeast of Midway. The flight decks of Nagumo's carriers are no longer places of clean preparation. They are crowded crossroads of urgency. Tomonaga's aircraft come back from Midway in ragged formations, some with punctured wings, some trailing fuel, some carrying wounded men who have held their machines in the air by force of will. Landing signals flash. Arresting wires snap tight beneath descending wheels. Deck crews drag damaged aircraft forward as quickly as they can, clearing space for the next pilot circling overhead with nearly dry tanks. Every minute spent recovering the returning strike is a minute in which the American carrier force remains untouched. Below deck, the hangars are packed with aircraft, bombs, torpedoes, fuel vapors, and men moving under unbearable pressure. Nagumo must now launch a strike against the ships reported by Tone's scout, but he cannot throw aircraft into the sky piecemeal. A carrier attack must be coordinated. Bombers, torpedo planes, fighters, fuel, weapons, formations, range. All of it must be assembled while enemy aircraft keep arriving to break the rhythm. The first American carrier planes come in low. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron leads Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet straight toward the Japanese fleet. His 15 Douglas TBD Devastators are slow, heavily burdened machines, flying without fighter cover. Their torpedoes hang beneath them like iron weights as they descend close to the water. Ahead, the Japanese carriers race across the sea, screened by destroyers and cruisers. Above them, Zeros turn toward Waldron's squadron. There is no room left for hesitation. The Devastators continue straight in. Japanese fighters tear into them before they can reach release range. One American aircraft bursts into flames and strikes the ocean. Another cartwheels across the water. Tracer fire sweeps through thin aluminum fuselages and open cockpits. Still, the surviving pilots hold their approach, because to turn away now is to abandon the attack entirely. Within minutes, every aircraft in Torpedo Squadron 8 is gone. Only Ensign George Gay survives, wounded and hidden in the water beneath a black seat cushion while the Japanese fleet churns nearby. Then Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise arrives. Again, the Zeros descend. Again, American aircraft fly low and slow through a curtain of cannon fire. Torpedoes drop into the waves, but the carriers turn away. No Japanese ship is struck. Then Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown attacks. More Devastators skim toward the carriers. More American crews die trying to force Nagumo's ships to turn, to scatter, to interrupt their flight decks for just a little longer. From Japanese bridges, the attacks seem almost suicidal. The American torpedo planes are being slaughtered. Zeros sweep low over the sea, chasing the survivors. Gunners fire until their barrels smoke. Carrier captains swing their ships through white wakes, escaping every torpedo track they can see. But the destruction of the torpedo squadrons carries a hidden cost. The Japanese combat air patrol is dragged down to wave-top height. The carrier formation is stretched and disturbed. Lookouts and fighter pilots are fixed upon the low-flying enemy coming from the horizon. High above the clouds, another American force is searching. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey has led the dive bombers of Enterprise across an empty ocean, expecting to find Nagumo's carriers where reports placed them. Instead, beneath his fuel-hungry aircraft, there is only water. His pilots are running short of gasoline. Turning back would save some of them. McCluskey does not turn back. He searches until he sees a single Japanese destroyer below, racing north at a high speed. The destroyer Arashi has fallen behind while attacking an American submarine. Now it is hurrying to rejoin Nagumo. McCluskey follows its wake. At almost the same moment, dive bombers from Yorktown, led by Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, approach from another direction. Their bomb release equipment has malfunctioned, forcing many pilots to arm their bombs electrically inside their cockpits. They continue toward the enemy anyway. At 10:20, clouds break beneath the American dive bombers. There they are. 4 Japanese carriers below. Their decks busy, their formations turning after yet another torpedo attack. On their hangar decks are fueled and armed aircraft. Around them, the Zeros are far too low to stop what is now directly overhead. On Akagi, an officer looks upward. Tiny dark shapes tip onto their noses. The dive bombers begin to fall. June 4th, 1942, 10:22 hours. Above the Japanese carrier striking force, the first American dive bombers plunge from the sun with engines screaming and dive brakes open, their wings trembling against the rushing air. Below them, Kaga fills the sight picture. Her flight deck is crowded with aircraft, hoses, carts, weapons, men, and the confusion of a carrier attempting to prepare a blow while recovering from attack. The warning reaches her too late. Lookouts shout. Anti-aircraft guns swing upward. Sailors on deck stare into the sky and see silver aircraft dropping almost vertically toward them. Bombs tear free. The first misses throw towers of water alongside the hull. Then direct hits smash into Kaga's flight deck. One explosion erupts near the forward elevator. Another bursts among aircraft packed with fuel and ordnance. Fire rolls outward in a bright orange sheet. Men vanish inside it. A bomb strikes near the bridge, killing Captain Jisaku Okada and much of the ship's command staff in an instant. Within seconds, Kaga ceases to be an organized warship. Her deck becomes a furnace. Aircraft ignite where they stand. Gasoline pours burning into spaces below. Bombs begin exploding from heat and shock, each detonation ripping open new paths for fire. North of her, Akagi is still turning. Lieutenant Richard Halsey. Best sees the mistake as American bombers concentrate on Kaga. He pulls out with 2 wingmen and turns toward Nagumo's flagship. 3 dive bombers now face the task of crippling the ship directing the entire Japanese strike force. Best pushes his Douglas Dauntless into its dive. On Akagi's bridge, Vice Admiral Nagumo and his staff have scarcely recovered from the torpedo attacks. Their fighters are low. Their decks are not ready to launch. The American ships have been located, but Japan's decisive counterstrike has still not left the carriers. A shout comes from above. Nagumo looks up into disaster. Best releases his bomb at close range and pulls away over the carrier's bow. The weapon penetrates the flight deck and detonates among armed and fueled aircraft in the hangar spaces. Flames leap through Akagi's interior. A second bomb explodes close alongside, twisting the deck edge and sending blast and fragments across the ship. Only one direct hit has been required. The flagship that coordinated Japan's victories across the Pacific is suddenly burning out of control. Almost at the same moment, Yorktown's dive bombers descend upon Soryu. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie's pilots have come in after struggling with faulty bomb arming systems, some forced to prepare their weapons by hand during flight. Now they drop through anti-aircraft fire toward the third carrier. Bombs crash into Soryu's deck. Her aircraft are being refueled and rearmed. Fire sweeps through them with terrifying speed. Explosions follow one another below deck, ripping through hangars and passageways. Captain Ryusaku Yanagimoto remains aboard as men stagger toward ladders and open deck spaces, choking in smoke thick with burning paint, gasoline, and flesh. At 10:28, scarcely 6 minutes after the attack begins, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers are burning. The sea around them is littered with wreckage and men. Destroyers rush alongside ships whose heat is already becoming unbearable. Sailors leap from flight decks into the water, some burned beyond recognition, some still clutching equipment they no longer need. Black smoke rises from Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu in enormous columns visible for miles. Only Hiryu remains untouched aboard her bridge. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi sees the smoke columns and understands what they mean. There is no time for grief and no time for confusion. American carriers must be struck before they launch again. Deck crews on Hiryu begin moving aircraft into position. Far to the west, aboard Yamato, the reports reach Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto piece by piece. Kaga hit, Soryu hit, Akagi hit, fires uncontrollable. Nagumo transferring command. The carrier force, the weapon around which his entire operation had been built, has been shattered before his battleships can fire a single shell. The distances on his chart now become merciless. His heavy guns cannot save burning flight decks hundreds of miles away. His scattered formations cannot suddenly close together. His plan had required surprise, timing, and control. All 3 are gone. Yet one carrier still lives. And while Hiryu can launch aircraft, Yamamoto's battle is not finished. It has merely become desperate. June 4th, 1942, 10:45 hours. Japanese carrier Hiryu, northeast of Midway. 3 pillars of smoke stand on the horizon where Japan's carrier striking force had ruled the morning. On Hiryu's flight deck, men do not look at them for long. There is no time to watch Akagi. Kaga and Soryu die. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi has 1 operational carrier left, 1 narrow deck from which to answer the American blow. Pilots run to their aircraft. Armorers make final checks beneath Aichi D-3A dive bombers armed with heavy bombs. Mitsubishi Zeros wait at the front of the formation, engines coughing blue exhaust across the deck. The carrier turns into the wind. Signal flags rise. The first counterstrike launches. 18 dive bombers and their fighter escort climb away from Hiryu, leaving behind fires so immense that the Japanese pilots can see them even as their carrier falls astern. They do not know which American ship their enemy aircraft came from. They know only that somewhere beyond the horizon are the flight decks responsible for the catastrophe behind them. Their search leads them to USS Yorktown. On the American carrier, men have already endured hours of tension. Her deck crews have launched aircraft, recovered fighters, refueled machines, cleared wreckage, and waited for the retaliation they know must come. Captain Elliot Buckmaster's ship is moving at speed. Her anti-aircraft crews alert, her radar operators watching their screens. Then the warning comes. Enemy aircraft approaching. Fighters rise to intercept. Wildcats tear into the Japanese formation, sending dive bombers down in smoke, but the surviving attackers push through. Their target grows beneath them, a long flat deck cutting through the blue Pacific, turning violently as guns along her sides begin firing. Black bursts fill the sky above Yorktown. The Japanese dive bombers tip over. Their sirens scream downward. Sailors flatten themselves against steel. Gun crews keep firing even as aircraft plunge directly toward them. One bomb smashes through the flight deck and explodes below. Another bursts near the stack, extinguishing boilers and choking passageways with smoke. A third detonates deep inside the ship. Yorktown shudders. Her speed collapses. Smoke pours upward. Fires spread through compartments below decks. From the air, the Japanese survivors see a carrier slowing and burning. They turn back toward Hiryu, believing they have crippled one of the American carriers. But aboard Yorktown, American damage control teams attack the destruction immediately. Men drag hoses through smoke. Others seal ruptured spaces, repair communications, and fight to restore power. Engineers work in heat and darkness to relight boilers. The carrier has already been patched together once after Coral Sea. Now, while the battle still rages around her, her crew does it again. Within hours, Yorktown is moving once more. On Hiryu, Yamaguchi receives the report of an American carrier damaged. He has no way of knowing that the target still lives. He prepares a second strike, this time with Nakajima B-5 and torpedo bombers. At 13:30, they lift from the deck. Far west aboard Yamato, Yamamoto confronts a battle now reduced to signals and distances. His carriers are burning. His invasion plan is breaking apart. Yet reports from Hiryu offer one remaining possibility. American carriers have been hit. If surface forces can close during darkness, if the surviving Japanese ships can find the enemy, perhaps the defeat can still be turned into a night battle of torpedoes and heavy guns. Orders begin moving through the fleet. Forces are to prepare for continued attack. The battle is not yet abandoned, but the deciding weapon is still the aircraft carrier. And Yamamoto has only one left. In the afternoon light, Hiryu's torpedo bombers find Yorktown again. To the Japanese pilots, she appears to be another American carrier because the burning ship reported earlier should not be moving at speed. They descend low over the water. American fighters intercept, but several attackers break through. Torpedoes splash into the sea and race toward the carrier. Yorktown turns, guns blazing. 2 explosions strike her port side. The ship heels heavily. Water floods inward. Men slide across the listing deck as equipment breaks loose around them. Captain Buckmaster finally gives the order to abandon ship. Sailors lower themselves into the sea and look back at the carrier that has survived bomb hits, torpedo hits, and everything her crew could do to save her. On Hiryu, returning pilots report another American carrier crippled. For a brief moment, it seems possible that the last Japanese carrier has struck back hard enough to change the battle. Then, late in the afternoon, lookouts on Hiryu hear aircraft engines high above the fleet. American dive bombers are coming again. This time, there is no second Japanese carrier to carry the fight. June 4th, 1942, 1700 hours. Japanese carrier Hiryu, northeast of Midway. The American dive bombers appear above Hiryu as the last operational Japanese carrier is still preparing another blow. On her flight deck, aircraft are being fueled and armed. Mechanics and armorers move beneath wings slick with salt and oil. Pilots who have returned from striking Yorktown are trying to report what they saw an American carrier bombed. Another torpedoed? Perhaps 2 enemy decks put out of action. Then men point skyward. 24 dauntless dive bombers from Enterprise, including aircraft from the wounded Yorktown, roll over into their dives. Zeros claw upward too late. Anti-aircraft guns open fire, surrounding the falling bombers with black bursts. But the formation keeps coming. A bomb crashes into Hiryu's forward flight deck. Then another. Then more explosions tear across the forward elevator and the packed aircraft near it. Flames explode upward from gasoline and ordnance. The carrier's bow disappears beneath smoke. Burning aircraft are thrown against one another. Men sprint with hoses toward fires already beyond any force they can control. Rear Admiral Tamen Yamaguchi stands on the bridge and watches the last striking deck of Japan's carrier force become unusable. The battle has now taken everything Nagumo brought to Midway. On Yamato, the messages arrive across the darkening sea. Hiryu has been hit. Flight operations impossible. Fire spreading. The final carrier capable of reaching the American fleet is no longer a weapon, only a burning hull surrounded by destroyers. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives no dramatic moment in which the truth can be spoken cleanly. There is no single sentence preserved from him that captures the collapse of his design. What remains in the record is more severe than any invented quotation. His orders. At first, Yamamoto still refuses to abandon the battle. His battleships remain powerful. His cruisers and destroyers are trained for night fighting, armed with deadly torpedoes and eager to close with an enemy that may be weakened. If American carriers can be found in darkness, the combined fleet might still impose a brutal price. Japanese forces turn eastward. Cruisers are sent toward Midway with orders to bombard the atoll. Staff officers bend over charts aboard Yamato, plotting courses that might bring steel and torpedoes against the Americans before daylight exposes them to aircraft again. But the Americans are not where Yamamoto needs them to be. Rear Admiral Spruance, aware that darkness may favor Japanese surface forces, keeps his carriers eastward. He will not offer the night engagement Yamamoto requires. The Japanese battle line advances into an ocean empty of targets, while behind it, 4 carriers burn or sink. As midnight passes into June 5th, the truth becomes impossible to evade. Midway cannot be occupied without carrier cover. The American carriers have not been destroyed. Nagumo's striking force has ceased to exist. The fleet Yamamoto divided for a masterpiece of entrapment is now too scattered, too exposed, and too badly wounded to continue. The order finally goes out. The Midway operation is cancelled. The fleet will retire westward. The cruisers racing toward the atoll turn away. In the darkness, during the confused withdrawal, the heavy cruisers Mogami and Mikuma collide while maneuvering to avoid a reported submarine. Mogami's bow folds inward. The retreat itself now leaves ships vulnerable to further American attack. Aboard the burning Hiryu, evacuation proceeds through smoke and heat. Captain Tomeo Kaku and Rear Admiral Yamaguchi choose to remain with their carrier. Before dawn, sailors abandon the ship. Destroyer torpedoes are fired into her damaged hull, but Hiryu refuses to sink immediately, drifting on as morning approaches. Eventually, the sea takes her Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu are gone. With them disappear aircraft, deck crews, engineers, officers, and a core of experienced Japanese naval air power that cannot quickly be replaced. Far away aboard Yamato, Yamamoto still commands battleships whose guns were never brought within reach of the deciding fight. His trap had depended on surprise. American intelligence had removed it before the first aircraft launched. His trap had depended on concentration. His own plan had divided his strength across the ocean. His trap had depended on destroying American carriers. Instead, 4 of Japan's best carriers have burned within sight of one another. The battle Yamamoto designed to finish the American Pacific Fleet has ended with his own striking force broken in the waters off Midway.